Okay, guys, so I'm going to explain the next couple of tasks to you, and then I'm going to read you the article. Okay, so I'm going to read this article, but what you're going to do with it is you're going to find 10 interesting or ambitious word choices, and you're going to find out what they mean using a dictionary on the internet, record the words and what they mean on slide 7. So down here on slide 7, you're going to write your words and their meaning. So you're just trying to learn some new ambitious vocabulary from the reading that you're doing, okay? And then after that, you're going to think about what the conventions of a newspaper article are. So I just wanted to tell you those things before I read you the article so that you can be thinking about that. So number one, key ambitious vocabulary, new words that you can teach yourself. And you could highlight those as we go through, and I will show you how to do that. And then task 2 is going to be to think about the conventions of a newspaper article. So what things do you expect to find? What are the ingredients of a newspaper article? Okay then, so the article is in a separate Google Doc. It's called Week 5, Year 7 IJ article. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit and then I'm going to read that to you. Okay. Tired, frozen, beaten. Image of Captain Scott's expedition that foretold a tragedy. A photograph from the ill-starred race to the South Pole goes on to auction this week, we look at the reasons for the sad failure of Scott's men to return. Robin McKee, Science Editor, Thursday the 27th of June, 2019. On the photograph there. From left, Lawrence Oates, Henry Bowers, Captain Scott, Edward Wilson and Edgar Evans. Photograph courtesy of Sotheby's. It'd be good if we could see the photograph. The photograph is still one of the most poignant ever taken. Captain Robert Falcon Scott, surrounded by 4 colleagues, poses at the South Pole, a Union Jack hanging limply in the background, on the 17th of January, 1912. He and his men look haunted. Their expressions suggest weariness and defeat, as well they might. Henry Bowers, Edward Wilson, Edgar Evans, and Lawrence Oates, along with their leader, had just tramped 850 miles over glaciers and ice fields in an attempt to become the first men to reach the South Pole, only to find that they had been beaten by the Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen. It's a terrible disappointment, Scott recalled in his journal, shortly after posing for the photograph. That photograph, one of a limited edition of prints taken during Scott's expedition, is to be sold at Sotheby's this week. Sotheby's is an auction house. Experts expect it to fetch between £800 and £1,000. But what it cannot show is the tragic story of what happened next. As the 5 disconsolate explorers headed back to base camp in safety, and one by one succumbed to the extremes of Antarctica. Evans was first to go. By the 7th of February, Scott noted that the strongest man in his team was going steadily downhill, constantly falling behind the party as it trudged over Antarctic wastes. 10 days later, Scott found the poor man on his knees with clothing disarranged, hands uncovered, frostbitten, and a wild look in his eyes. Evans died that night, most probably of brain damage incurred during a fall that no one else had witnessed. The party was still hundreds of miles from base camp, and the weather closing in. The 4 survivors had to spend days huddled in their tents as gales howled and their food dwindled. By mid-March, Oates was lame from frostbite and could hardly walk. On the 16th of March, he staggered out of the tent into a blizzard. We knew that poor Oates was walking to his death, but though we tried to dissuade him, we knew that it was the act of a brave man and an English gentleman, Scott wrote. A week later, Bowers, Wilson and Scott were 3 days short of their next food depot when they were caught in another blizzard. They never left their tent. Wilson wrote to his wife, Oriana, and Bowers to his mother, while Scott scribbled copious letters to friends, families, and colleagues. His final words were written on the 29th of March. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. R. Scott, he scrawled, before adding the last frantic message, for God's sake, look after our people. 8 months later, a party of explorers from base camp found the tip of the tent containing the bodies of Bowers, Scott, and Wilson. Scott was lying with his 2 comrades on either side. Scott looked agitated, as if he had struggled to the last. The others seemed at peace. The search team took away the bamboo supports of the tent, and on top of it, they built a cairn, which is now buried deep under the Antarctic ice. Okay, so you may or may not have known about that story previously. But that's a story of a very tragic story of Captain Scott and his team's expedition to the Antarctic. So The first task was to pick 10 interesting or ambitious vocabulary choices. So you're going to read through it again, and you might want to highlight them so you remember. Okay. So straight away, I notice foretold might be quite an ambitious word. It might not be a word you usually use in your writing, so you can give that one a little highlight. Ill-starred. Do you know what ill-starred means? I'm not going to tell you now because that's the point of this activity, but it's quite a nice expression to be able to use. So you're going to carry on going through that, highlight all of the terms or the words that you either don't know or don't use regularly in your own writing. And then you come to slide 7 and use Google or a dictionary to look at the meaning of those words. If you can try and use those words in a sentence, that's even better, so it gives you practice of how to actually use them instead of just knowing what they mean. Then slide 8, conventions of a newspaper article. So these are like the ingredients that a newspaper article needs. So if I just go back to it again, I can see straight away that there's a heading on a newspaper article: tired, frozen, beaten. So I'm going to write my number 1 heading. Okay, so you need to find 4 more ingredients for a newspaper article.